What's up, everybody? It's Jose from Haunted Cruise. Welcome back to my channel. And as always, I'm so excited to see you today. As some of you may know, today is the second meeting of our Page to Scream book club here on our channel. Now, if you haven't already heard of what the Page to Scream book club is, you can always check out the intro video that we initially made a few months back that breaks down exactly what it is that we do and how we go about doing it. It's pretty self-explanatory though. Page to Scream book club, we every month take a look at a work of horror literature that was eventually adapted into a movie. Last month in January, we covered Psycho by Robert Bloch, which was adapted into the film by Alfred Hitchcock in 1960. And this month, for our February 2022 session, we are taking a look at Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. That's this book right here. That's Interview with the Vampire, and that's Anne Rice right there. We got the full package here. You can't expect anything less from this channel. If you're interested in joining in on the conversation, there are a couple ways you can go about doing that. Of course, we always love to hear from viewers in the comments section. If this is a book that you've read before, if this is a movie that you've seen before and either love, hated, or have never been exposed to either one of those things, and yet your curiosity has been piqued by our conversation, then let us know in the comments. You can also always reach out to us at our email address, which is hauntedcruise@gmail.com. That's the name of the channel, hauntedcruise@gmail.com, and let us know your thoughts there. But also feel free to drop us a line at any point in time at that email address, whether you have thoughts, recommendations, suggestions for future meetings of the Page to Scream book club, or just anything that you might like to see us cover on the channel. I know I've mentioned this before, but I'm always open to that kind of feedback from our viewers. I love the idea of exploring new things that I might not have otherwise encountered. So if you have suggestions and recommendations, reach out to us, let us know. I'd love for your feedback to kind of guide the type of content that we cover on this channel. And I know I haven't been producing much content to speak of. I mentioned in a previous video that this year has just gone off to one heck of a start, and that has held true even for the second month. Nothing worth dwelling on. If you can't tell by the sound of my voice, I'm just getting over some kind of cold or some such nonsense. I don't know, it seems like every time that I film a video, I'm either in the middle of something illness-wise, or I'm just getting over something. I don't know if this is a sign from the universe that I was not meant to be on YouTube, and at this point it is an official hazard to my health to continue down this path any further. But I say, if I gotta go, then I'm gonna do it in front of an audience, you know what I mean? But in any case, I am hoping to premiere more content on this channel in the weeks and months to come. But to be honest with you, I know I kind of set a goal for myself in my initial welcome video of, oh, I'm going to release a video every week. Of course, that was optimistic beginning YouTuber talking there. That's, you know, frankly just not possible, at least for me in my situation. But in any case, I will do my best to be consistent, but I am honestly... We keep it very cash here at Haunted Cruise. I've noticed just in the short time that I've been here that so many booktubers, YouTubers of all kinds, we just put so much pressure on ourselves to produce and just create original content week in, week out, day in, day out. And I've kind of been through that already. I've been a freelance writer and a blogger for years now, over 10 years. You know, when I took on this YouTube adventure, I kind of told myself that I didn't want to do that all over again. I didn't want to worry myself and make calendars and say I'm going to release this on this date. I mean, I will be surprised. I'm actually filming this video on my birthday. I know, happy birthday to me. I actually had to turn off the notifications on my phone because I left them on. We would have just been inundated with the amount of good birthday wishes that I would have been getting from all of my friends and enemies and acquaintances, and that would have just been totally embarrassing for you, I mean. But I told myself that I didn't want to worry about all of that. I didn't want to, you know, stress over even getting things done on time. Like I was saying, filming this video on my birthday, that's February 23rd, by the way. This is set to premiere on the 25th. I'm sure I'll have it up by then, but maybe it'll go up Saturday, maybe it'll even go up Sunday or even Monday. I mean, let's just chill, okay? These are not serious world affairs that we're dealing with here. And of course, I'm not really talking to all of you, I'm talking to myself with that. So, and I mean, really, isn't this about me when you get right down to it? I mean, let's be honest with ourselves here. But anyway, Page to Screen Book Club. I mentioned a few ways that you could participate. There's comments, there's email, but also, if you happen to have a YouTube channel of your own, take this as an open invitation. No matter if you're just starting out like me, you got 50 or so subscribers, 7 subscribers, if you got 5,000 subscribers, it does not matter to me. Feel free. Anybody and everybody who has any desire to participate in this is free to do so. If you're making a new video specifically for the book club, where you're reviewing Interview with the Vampire and talking about Anne Rice, then let me know and I will include a link to your video in the description. We had a couple responses to our Psycho video last month from folks like Plagued by Visions and Alex at the Bookubus. Thank you, Juan. Thank you, Alex. That is so appreciated. When you're starting out, any expression of camaraderie is appreciated, and honestly, even if I wasn't just starting out, I really appreciate each and every gesture that's made. So thank you, both of you. And like I mentioned in the announcement video for this session, Interview with the Vampire, folks are free to make those videos whenever. They don't necessarily have to be created and released on the book club day itself. If you have filmed a Psycho video in the weeks, just as an example, in the weeks since then, and you've been sitting on it like, oh, there was the book club and I made the video, but it wasn't done on time, and oh, I'm a failure. Forget that stuff. Come on. We're all better than that. Let me know anyway. Post it. This is not... I'm terrible when it comes to being timely, so I should in no way be seen as like, oh no, well, if Jose got it done on the day he said it was going to, then that means that mine, which was done well after the fact, is completely invalid. I'm sure that I'm going to be late on my own deadlines plenty of times in the future. This may very well be late of its February 25th slated publication date. So that's my way of saying, feel free to reach out with those videos anytime. It could be months, even years out from a given book club meeting date. And if you've made a video and you just want to join in on the club, as it were, let me know and I'll include that in the description. So going forward, anybody who visits those book club videos will see your lovely contribution along with all the other ones. So don't let the timestamp get in the way. It's certainly not getting in my way. We're just going with the flow here. So yes, if you have a YouTube channel and you want to make your own video response, hit me up at that email address, leave a mention of it in the comments, and I will include you in our roundtable of book reviews. So now that we know a little bit of what this club is and how it works as far as participation is concerned, let's get into the nitty-gritty. So when I reviewed Psycho last month, this is not Psycho, but I just kind of waved it when I said that as if it were. When I reviewed Psycho last month, I kind of just found myself stumbling into a format. I honestly cannot tell you if it's going to be a format that I'm going to uphold, but basically what I ended up doing was I shared a little bit of backstory or history behind the creation of the novel, and I spoke a little bit about the history and the creation of the film, and then I kind of sporadically threw in my critical comments regarding both of them throughout the video. So I think that's what I'm going to kind of do here for Interview with the Vampire. But probably the first thing that I wanted to say about my selection of Interview with the Vampire, and I can't think this far back, guys. I'm a father of 3 children under the age of 5. I'm just doing my best here, okay? But I think when I made my announcement video, when I said that we would be covering Interview with the Vampire for our February selection, I think I had mentioned that I actually have no experience with this series or with any of Anne Rice's works in general. Had no previous experience. That was not the case for Psycho. I had read the book years previously. I've, of course, seen the movie dozens of times, but that was not the case for our selection this month. I never read any of Anne Rice's written works, and I think I had seen the movie all the way through maybe once, but honestly, it might have been a bits and pieces kind of a thing. I can't honestly recall. So I made that conscious decision because I didn't just want to keep retreating my own steps. I wanted to explore new terrain, like I mentioned. So I figured that a writer whose works I never read and a movie that I only kind of had faint memories of would be a logical next step. Interview with the Vampire and Anne Rice in general, I know, has a rabid following of fans, and I think that was kind of one of the things that attracted me to it, was that here's somebody who I really have no exposure to, who has quite a devoted following. So what I actually did shortly after I made my announcement video and published it was that I made a post on the Books of Horror Facebook page. The Books of Horror Facebook page is a really great group. I'm not an administrator, so I'm not shilling my own product here, but I'm just a member, and it's a really, really wonderful collection of horror fans and aficionados. Not only just a few things that I've posted in that group, but just watching others post in that group and the way that everybody else responds to them. It is just such a welcoming and knowledgeable group of people. I really can't recommend it enough. So if you are not already a member of the Books of Horror Facebook page, highly recommend them. They're really wonderful. Somebody actually posted a few weeks back something along these lines where it's like, I'm not asking for anything or recommending anything in return. I just wanted to come in and say how wonderful all of you people are, and it was well deserved, honestly. That is just a fantastic group, wonderfully moderated discussions. So if you're not already, definitely join that group. But after I posted my announcement video, I mentioned that, hey, for February, we're going to be reading Interview with the Vampire, which, as it turns out, the Books of Horror Facebook page has its own book club, and they were reading Interview with the Vampire for their February selection, so kismet, I guess. Just kind of funny timing. It was on everybody's mind, it seems. But I said in my post that I wanted to hear from some of the folks who had read this series before, or this book in particular, with their thoughts and recollections, because I wanted to get a sense of what other people's experiences were in coming to this book and this series. So some very lovely people responded, and I mentioned that if it worked out all right, I would try to incorporate some of those in my actual book club video, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So we got some responses here that I just wanted to share with everybody. I'm not attributing any names to this, just to respect everybody's privacy. But if you were one of these people and you're watching this video now, feel free to comment and say, oh, that was me, but only if you feel so inclined and comfortable. But I wanted to share some of these comments because I thought they were really lovely, especially coming to the book and the series myself as a newcomer and just seeing other people's perspectives. So let's read through some of these. First comment was, I personally love Anne Rice and Vampire Chronicles. I read them when I was 16 years of age and they impacted me greatly, really pushed me into vampire books and movies. I am now rereading them in my 40s and wow, they are still amazing. I love the character development and the further stories do feel like you're reading about someone's life. Amazing. I even named my first cat Louie because it whined when I startled him. Smiley face. The next commenter kind of picked up on that thrown gauntlet and they said, Lestat was right. Louie is a big whiner. Then somebody responded there, yes, couldn't stand him. We'll get into that, of course, in just a little bit. Next commenter, Anne Rice shaped me as an author. She changed my life. I love hearing that kind of stuff. Isn't that great? Next comment. One of the rare cases where I enjoyed the film much more than the book. I enjoyed Lestat and Queen of the Damned, the books, a lot more. In my honest opinion, one of the greatest books ever written in the genre. Well, Anne reintroduced the genre to not only fresh eyes, but brought back everything we love about vampires. I have a signed first edition, met her years ago when her home in NOLA, New Orleans, was part of a private historical tour. She will be sorely missed. This may interest some. I still have the swag from her original Vampire Lestat fan club. In the printed edition, she describes her feelings after seeing the film for the first time. I would love to see that and to hear it. Of course, there is some footage of her on the DVD copy of the film that I watched, where you see a little bit of her estimation of the film that was made for the movie. So I guess those things should maybe always be taken with a grain of salt, but I feel like her feelings were genuine in her case. I've got a UK first edition from 1976 that I shamelessly nicked from a library when I was 15 in 1987. It has been read, loved, and smeared with a wee bit of way too intense teenage goth blood. Mine. Thank you for clarifying. I painted one of my bedroom walls with a huge portrait of the front cover of Interview. Wow, nice. And draped fake cobwebs over tarnished candelabras bought from dusty charity shops. Anne Rice, her vampires, and those tantalizing Mayfair witches were my constant companions growing up, and they still grace my bookshelves today. I love stuff like that. My goodness. Like I said, I'm not attributing names, so I don't even recall who said what here. But that person who left that comment, thank you for that. That was such an interesting story, and I just love that kind of passion. That's really all I can say about that, I guess. But thank you for sharing that. I love this book, and Anne Rice, others. Sometimes she does go on, but so beautiful when they talk about their lives at different times. I like how that little critical comment was just kind of lodged in the middle there. She does go on sometimes. I found parts lagging. She really took her time to describe curtains and architecture and all that, but for what this novel is, an original peek into the existential angst of immortals, it's brilliant. At the end, I thought it was excellent, and there were some compelling parts that I thought were very creative. Also, it's a great format. So those were some of the comments that were shared from the Books of Horror Facebook group. Thank you, everybody who shared those comments. They were really lovely to read. I was very happy to share them. If you happen to be watching this video, just give us a high five, a wave. Thank you for contributing to that. That really helped me get a sense of what people thought of this book and these books. So I really value that, and I appreciate your time. Alright, so we heard what some other people thought of this book. What did I think of this book? So just a few words on the inception of this book, kind of like I did for Psycho. This story seems to be pretty well circulated. I think more people know about the creation of Interview with the Vampire than compared to, say, those who previously had heard about the creation of Psycho. So I won't dwell on it for too much. To be honest, doesn't seem like there's very much there outside of just traditional author had an idea and expanded upon that idea. Because as it so happens, Anne Rice actually originally conceived of this and wrote it as a short story in the late 60s. I believe I read it was 1968, 1969. And it just kind of chilled out in a drawer for a little while. I didn't come across anything that said that short piece was actually published anywhere. So it just, it was a drawer story, kind of sat chilling out for a little while. But the concept really intrigued her. Like, what would a vampire tell you if you were able to sit one down and ask it to describe its life to you? She mentioned in the filmed introduction that accompanies the DVD that reading literature herself that had vampire characters, she always thought that the vampire was the interesting person and not necessarily the human heroes or crusaders that the narrative was focused on in examining their perspective. It was always the vampire. It's like, why are we wasting our time with these people? We know how people work. Why aren't we examining that vampire more closely? So this was her attempt to do that. So it first started out as a short story. According to the Wikipedia entry, as you can tell, I do esteemed research, especially being a librarian. I look on Wikipedia. I believe I read that it was a student, a fellow student, I think, a fellow student that encouraged her to, hey, this sounds like it might have legs. There might be more of a story to tell here. You might want to consider expanding this, and that's exactly what she did. It wasn't published as a novel until 1976, so it was almost a decade later that this thing finally made its way into the world as a full-fledged novel. The funny thing about this is that I say full-fledged novel, it's just over 300 pages, which in light of modern fiction seems almost laughable. At least what I have seen of adult and even young adult fiction. Something that's only 300 pages long seems to be a rarity, especially if it's, oh my goodness, part of a series. That thing should be at least 400 pages, if not 500. We got world building to do here. So this is a slim book. Not as slim as Psycho, but it is on the slimmer side, at least by modern conventional standards. Funny thing about the length of this book, by the way. I guess now is just as good a time as any to mention it. So here I am, Jose of Haunted Cruise, who has started the Page to Scream book club, and here we all are to sit and talk about this book in book club fashion. I have a shocking confession to make. I did not finish this book. I know. Hold on to those pearls, because it's not gonna get any prettier from here. But no, truth be told, I did not finish this book. It was not from want of finishing it. It was not a lack of desire to finish it. It was just a matter of time, folks. And that phrase really does have deeper meaning. I think it was only just a matter of time before this project of mine stuttered to a stop. No, we're gonna keep this going because, like I mentioned earlier, we're very cash here. We're very chill, and you know what? When you go to, if you actually attend in-person book clubs, there are people who don't finish the book all the time. And I say that from absolutely no experience of attending an in-person book club, but I imagine that would be the case. Not everybody's going to finish the book either because they don't want to, or maybe it's a situation like mine where, gosh, it was cool, it was interesting, but I just did not have the time to finish the darn thing in time for our meeting today. And that was the case with me. I did not finish it. I just got about 20 or so pages into part 2, which is about halfway through the book. Is my bookmark still in here? Hey, my bookmark's still in here. Okay, yeah, page 155, it looks like I conked out on, which is a shame, like I said, because I was really enjoying this book. But no, I didn't finish it. So guess what? Like I said before, not only do we keep it chill, not only am I late on things, but sometimes I don't finish things. I'm not the one who has the channel. I have, the book club, whatever. So if you are interested in participating, if I am the low bar that you need to set for yourself, then I will happily offer myself up as such. I will be your low bar. Because if you finish the book, guess what? You're already coming out on top of the person who started the book club. It is a very, very lovely book. Just to reflect back on some of those comments that were made earlier. So, Louis is our main character. He's, by this time, just about 200 years old. I believe his story starts in the 1790s. It's the 1970s by the time of this book. So he's just about 200 years old. And he recounts his life from the time that he was turned into a vampire to present day. Most of the story seems to take place during, the first few centuries, so from the 1790s up through the 1800s, and then we're off to visit Paris. I didn't even get that far, though. I just got to the sequence where Louis and Claudia, who is a 5-year-old girl whom Louis and his, what would you call him? His friend? His, a vampire parent? His vampire forebearer? I don't know. But anyway, Louis' partner, Lestat, the vampire who turned him into an immortal, they conjunctly transform this young girl, Claudia, into a vampire. So now they have kind of this little family unit. But I just got to the sequence where Louis and Claudia are off to Eastern Europe, and they've just come upon the inn that has the garlic cloves and the crucifixes hanging around, and the peasants looking around very shiftily. So that's where I stopped. So I didn't even get to the Paris stuff. I know. But really enjoyed what I've read so far. So some of those comments we heard earlier from the Books of Horror folks was that Louis is a big whiner. He just goes on and on. Lestat says many things to the same effect. And I see where that criticism stems from, is because this is Louis' stories. So in a sense, he's very self-absorbed with his transformation and his struggle to reckon with his vampire identity. Even though he is a creature who must now live on blood, he is very reticent to kill, especially humans. He still has a delicate hook into his previous mortal life, and he feels that it's immoral still to kill people. Lestat, on the other hand, is a very freewheeling, devil-may-care kind of figure. He seems to delight in killing people and even making them, suffer a little bit. He kind of drags out the kills a little bit and just, scares people before he sucks them dry. That's just his vibe. So it becomes easy to see why people like Lestat, because he's the fun one, and not like Louis because he's the downer, right? But I didn't necessarily feel that way myself. They offered up a balanced view of this mythic figure of the vampire. Like others have commented, it is really interesting how Anne Rice took this figure and examined it seriously, in the sense of, now if I could well and truly sit a vampire down, what would they have to tell me? She approaches the topic with seriousness, but not, over seriousness. Maybe others would argue that it is a little too ponderous for its own good, but I didn't feel that way. Some of the passages were, kind of tough going. It's like, whew, okay, there are these big blocky paragraphs, suffused with detail. It's the first author's book. You kind of get a sense of that they just want to tell you everything. Even though the book is only 300 pages, you just get the sensation that, Anne Rice wanted to take her time using all the words to paint a picture and really get you into these characters' heads and describe the world, the historical details, and the supernatural insights into how these creatures must feel. So I was actually kind of reminded in some spots, this may be an oversimplistic comparison, but I was actually kind of reminded of Poe, Edgar Allan Poe. In particular, the passages where Louis is really mentally anguishing over his identity and what am I right now? Because apparently you're telling me that I'm a vampire, but I don't feel like a vampire, and what does that mean for the rest of my existence? That there are vampires walking around, and so on and so forth. Just feel the hand wringing and, the chest beating in some of those passages, and that really reminded me of Edgar Allan Poe, who, of course, as some of us know, knew mental anguish quite intimately and vividly himself in his personal life, and reflected that in some of his fictional works as well. But overall, I would say that even though some of those sections of the book can be kind of thick, this is not like a speed read, beach novel kind of situation that we got here. You know, you really have to take your time with it. I tried doing that, you know, to get this thing read on time. You could see how successful I was there. But I think truly, though, in part, to share some of the blame, that, you know, was not just a lack of time on my part, but it was just the thickness of the prose in this book. You really have to work your way through it. You can't just skim these paragraphs because there are just so many words in them. So it was, in part, the thickness of the prose and just the lack of time on my part that I think led to me not being able to finish this book. But overall, even with that in mind, I don't feel like, oh god, you know, what a slog. I never felt bored necessarily during any part of the book that I had read thus far. It was gripping, especially when we got back to Louis's identity crisis. I did find that quite gripping. I'm a Pisces. I'm a, you know, very dreamy kind of person. So when these types of existential questions get asked, and they're phrased as eloquently as they are here, you know, it just gets my mind working and thinking like, wow, what would that be like? You know, that's just me in general. One of my favorite sequences from this book was when Louis finds himself in the church. And he's just sitting there in the pews, and he's kind of looking around and reflecting on his existence. It's one of his top favorite things to do. And he has, ironically, an epiphany, but it's not quite the religious epiphany that somebody else may have in that setting. It's the exact opposite. He has this aha moment where he realizes that the supernatural only exists with him. He's looking around at like these statues and these sacraments of all these holy religious figures, and he's telling himself, I have not seen any proof, any vivid, in-my-face proof that these things exist, but I have seen vampires, and I am now a vampire. It's just this really great, powerful moment that explodes in this moment of violence where he attacks a priest. And one of the things he says to him is that I am the only supernatural thing in this church. I'm paraphrasing here. It came off better in the book. But the priest is, you know, calling out to heaven and the Holy Father, and, you know, Louis is just overcome with himself, and he actually does kill the priest in a rare moment of human violence for him. That was just one of those moments where I said, yes, Anne Rice gets it. And that's what I mean when I say she was approaching her topic seriously. Like, she was bringing deep consideration to how would a vampire deal with the fact if, say, they were of devout religious belief in their human life. How would they react in becoming a vampire and realizing that none of that other stuff exists? You know, just really profound stuff there. I love that. And I think some similar stuff came up later that I also really liked, that I think I heard reflected in an interview of Anne Rice's that I read, where I believe the question was, what are you most afraid of? You know, like, what scares you? That question that everybody loves to ask horror writers and artists. What scares you? And her response was something to the tune of the thought that we are in a meaningless, loveless existence or universe, that we have no purpose here, there's no reason for our existence, and the universe doesn't care about us, and nothing is worthwhile or worth doing, just a blank, careless void. And of course, maybe the more scientifically minded amongst us would say that, well, yeah, that's just how it is. That there is no benevolent creator or whatever the case may be as far as your beliefs are concerned. But hearing Anne Rice articulate, I just kind of had to look back at her because I feel like I'm talking to her. Anne, when I read that response of yours from the interview, even if that was not necessarily my greatest fear or apprehension, I could feel in your words that that was truly the most terrifying thing for you. And even though, as I said, that might not necessarily be my belief, I felt your belief as if it were mine, and I just felt for you, and I understand. So yeah. But I feel like that comes through in this book, at least in the parts that I read, right? That's essentially what Louis is grappling with. This idea that there is no meaning to anything. One day there are no vampires, those things don't exist, and the next day those are the only things that exist, right? It's just some very heady existential stuff. Like some of the folks from the Books of Horror Club were commenting on, just getting into those interior lives of what have traditionally been just kind of these supernatural furnishings for like these romantic, gothic romantic stories, really getting into their heads and asking these kinds of questions. I think it's true to say, as many others have already, that this book was a game changer. Maybe we don't necessarily like or agree with its format or its style. It's kind of told in that languid prose that's thick on detail, and that's just not our cup of tea. But it's hard to argue that this book didn't change things, because clearly it did, right? I am truly looking forward to reading the rest of this book, even though I'm filming this review and posting it on the channel. I will finish this book. I'm probably not going to follow it up with, oh, hey, here's what I thought of the rest of the book. It'd probably just be more of the same. But in any case, I will finish this book, and for you, for your memory, this has just been a very fabulous read so far, and I thank you for it, and I thank your fans for bringing so much perspective to it. And I'm looking forward to reading the rest. So what about the film? After all, this is the page to film. The page to film? Is that what this is? Yeah. Don't even know the name of my own book club. Isn't this fun? Page to Screen Book Club Interview with the Vampire. The book is released in 1976. The film comes out nearly 20 years later. Oh boy, and I just realized that I have not bothered to look up the year the Interview with the Vampire came out. How embarrassing. Pretty sure it was 94. I'm almost positive it's 94. Don't quote me on that, okay? But anyway, the film comes out almost 20 years later. From some of the material that I heard in the behind-the-scenes footage that's included on the DVD, it sounded like the film was a long time in coming and gestating. Neil Jordan, who was the director of the eventual adaptation, mentioned in his comments that this was just kind of one of those properties that had been floating around for a really long time. It had been attributed to other stars, other directors, before it just kind of landed in his lap towards the end of the 80s, early 90s. And he was the one who ended up doing it. Neil Jordan. We need to talk about a couple things with this movie. But first, since I mentioned him, let's talk about Neil Jordan. This director does not get nearly enough credit for making two of some of the most sublime horror films to come out within those two decades, the 80s and the 90s. The first being the Company of Wolves, which I believe was 86. The Company of Wolves, which was actually based on stories from Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber. So that is a very, very likely contender for a future edition of the Page to Screen Book Club, since we're doing a Neil Jordan film based on somebody's written work. kind of reinventing the tropes that they were dealing with. In Angela Carter's case, it was fairy tales and werewolves. In Anne Rice's case, it's the Gothic and vampires. So we're probably not going to do that anytime soon. We don't want to repeat ourselves too much, right? But I saw The Company of Wolves years ago, and oh boy, I loved it. It was in high school, and I love that movie. Just beautiful, gorgeous, sumptuous. Use any word that you like along those lines, which the same can be said of Angela Carter's stories from the Bloody Chamber. Beautiful purple prose, just gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. But yeah, Neil Jordan does not get nearly enough credit for helming The Company of Wolves and Interview with the Vampire. Those are rock solid movies that take their particular concepts in the same way that the original books, literary works did, that take the concepts of these two monsters, werewolves and vampires, and produce fabulous results with them. This is kind of a spoiler of what I've thought of Interview with the Vampire at the movie, but I'm just putting it up right up front. What other director has done that? I'm not saying that there hasn't been, okay? So easy does it in the comments. I'm not saying there's never been a director that has taken like two horror concepts and done amazing things with them. I'm sure they're out there. Let me know in the comments, you know. I'm just putting it out there that I'm not claiming nobody's ever done this before. But let me know for those others who have done this. But that's rare. I think we can at least agree on that. That is rare, especially for somebody who is not traditionally viewed or has worked exclusively or even really close to exclusively, based on what I know of Neil Jordan's filmography, in the horror genre. The fact that he kind of came back to it, you know, within a 10-year period on two separate occasions and produced these amazing films is remarkable, I think. I know he also directed Byzantium, which is another vampire film. I have not seen that. I've not seen a lot of movies that were made after the year 2000. That's just me, folks. Sorry. I'm an old fogey. But I've never seen Byzantium. I've heard pretty good things about it, so maybe at some point I'll check that out. If I hear enough arguments in its favor, that might convince me to check it out and maybe even make a video of it in the future. But yeah, Company of Wolves, an Interview with the Vampire, rock solid adaptations, rock solid movies. So that's one of the things I wanted to mention about this movie that we needed to talk about. Neil Jordan, high fives all around. Something else I wanted, two things specific and somewhat specific to the movie that I want to talk about. I miss opening credits. I know that sounds really random, but gosh almighty, guys, I miss opening credits in movies, or, you know, opening sequences, I should say, because that's what Interview with the Vampire starts with. And it's very simple. It's just, you know, a kind of bird's eye descent, so to speak, into the city of San Francisco. Starts off with the Golden Gate Bridge, moves down through the port of San Francisco, through the buildings and the skyscrapers before we end up in the room where Brad Pitt and Christian Slater are for the Interview with the Vampire, set against some beautiful requiem kind of choral music that just immediately puts you in the time, in the place, in the vibe of the movie. And that's the thing with opening sequences that I just miss so much. You know, I try not to be that old fogey that, oh, you know, the movies back in my day. And, I mean, they're not even my day. But, you know, the movies of the past, you know, they're just totally better than this new crap, blah, blah, blah. I don't try to be that person. I can't help it sometimes, I guess. But, you know, I try to give everybody a fair shake. But I gotta say, when I see new movies, I feel that piece is missing. I feel like we should be lulled or pumped up, whatever the appropriate vibe is, for what's to come. The opening sequence does that for you. I don't want to go so far as to say is that it's the thesis of the movie, but it gets folks ready. And when you just lodge people into the action right away, I mean, there's a purpose behind that too. I guess it has its advantages, but man, I don't know. I'm still not convinced that excising opening sequences is the way to go. And as simple as the one in Interview with the Vampire is, it was, whatever. When I watched it, I was just like, ah. I just had that feeling. So, kind of random tangent. Sorry about that. This one will be even more random. But one of the other thoughts that I had was, man, I miss narration in trailers. Again, old fogey talking. But just in general, I love the trailer for, well, I love trailers in general. That even trailers for new stuff, I get pumped up for that stuff. But I love the art of a film trailer. I may do a video on those in the future. It won't be technologically advanced or interesting. It'll just be me talking in a room because that's all I'm capable of doing. And I love older trailers that have that narration. And in particular, when I was watching the trailer for Interview with the Vampire, and it had the very somber, slow narration, and it's taking you through this world of vampires. It's Jesus. I'll probably just throw some footage from the trailer here in this spot of the video. It's the least I can do. I can throw you a little bit of a bone here.
What do you say we get started?
So you want me to tell you the story of my life? I'll tell you my story. I'll tell you all of it. How? I'm flesh and blood, but not human. I haven't been human for 200 years.
From the novel by Anne Rice. From Neil Jordan, the director of The Crying Game.
I've come to answer your prayers. Life has no meaning anymore, does it?
His name is Lestat.
But what if I could give it back to you? Pluck out the pain and give you another life. One you could never imagine.
I can see you lying on a bed of satin.
He chose one man. He gave him infinite power. Eternal life. And a daughter who would be forever young.
This is the only real evil left.
And then he took the light of day.
I want some more.
Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Stephen Ray, Antonio Banderas, Kirsten Dunst, and Christian Slater. Interview with the Vampire.
But it put me in mind of like other trailers. It actually put me in mind of the trailer to Angel Heart, which is a film that I absolutely love. That may also be a contender for a future episode of Pages Scream Book Club, because that was based on a novel by William Jortsberg. And that is actually another movie. And I feel like they have this connection in their own way, Angel Heart and Interview with a Vampire, and that they were helmed by directors who are not exclusively or especially known for horror, so to speak. They came from diverse directing backgrounds, more or less. They were not necessarily, not to disparage the names that I'm bringing up, but they were not necessarily like John Carpenter's or Wes Craven's, these folks who had kind of built a reputation on this kind of stuff. Which is, again, not to disparage the work that either of those two examples did, or anybody who works exclusively in the genre. But I think there is something to say about artists who do not exclusively work, specifically in the horror genre, who come and try something there. I don't think I've come across anything that has not, at the very least, been interesting in those cases. You're getting that outsider's perspective of what's creepy, what's unsettling. When we are fans of this stuff and we in turn become creators, we kind of take that passion with us, which is great for like different projects or creations. Say, for instance, like Fred Decker and the Monster Squad. that film clearly exudes a love of a particular fandom, and that makes sense for that movie. But I think it's also very, very interesting when people who are not necessarily die-hard horror fans make horror films or works of any kind, because they're trying something out and they're tapping into that well of their own personal fears in a way that they might not get the chance to in other projects that they do. And I think more times than not, as a result, you get this potent stuff that bubbles to the surface when you kind of have that outsider perspective. So I feel like Interview with the Vampire by Neil Jordan and Angel Heart by Alan Parker kind of exude that vibe, and honestly kind of exude that seriousness that Anne Rice brought to her original novel. Because at least in the things that I've read and seen of her, she has not necessarily given off this vibe to me that she was exclusively a fan of spooky stuff growing up. She seems to have had a very well-rounded passion and love of literature and creative works. This was just kind of the mode that she found herself working in for the majority of her career. But with Alan Parker and Angel Heart, this is turning into a review of Angel Heart. But just to say that that's what they have in common, is that this kind of seriousness to the material, and not just seeing, a horror film as like, ooh, hey, yeah, now we get to play around with blood and, ooh, creepy monsters. They're approaching it with this seriousness that is just very potent and is very fascinating to watch, and usually quite enjoyable, because in a sense they're approaching it not as ooh, horror, they're approaching it as art. And God, I know that must sound so elitist and so snobby, but at least in this moment, that's the only way that I can put it. They're approaching it with the same mindset that they would approach any other of their previous projects with. That same kind of seriousness and consideration, which, don't get me started, I'm all about fun horror. I am in the same boat as everybody else when it comes to the term elevated horror, but like I said, there's something to be said when you get that outsider perspective. And when you just look at those two trailers side by side, they feel very akin. There's just this vibe that I think, late-ish 80s, early 90s historical movies give off, where they, even though they may be particular to period details and things like that, they still feel a little grungy, a little scratchy. They're not pristine. You know what I mean? And I feel like Interview with the Vampire, the film, for all of its opulent costumes and whatnot, something about that movie still feels a little gritty to me. Maybe I'm the only one who feels that way about it. But I don't know if it's just a film stock that these movies in particular were filmed on, but they kind of have this grainy, slightly worn quality about them, and I just love it. And I love their trailers that has this kind of world-weary narration about it, and I feel like that comes through in the film. Suffice to say, I've kind of already made a point of it already, but I loved the film. Interview with the Vampire is great. I haven't seen it intact, maybe at all, but at least since I was quite young. And, there were some things that I was a little bit more attuned to it this time around than I might have been when I was younger. Of course, it can't escape comments, it seems, anytime Interview with the Vampire, especially the film, is brought up. The gay overtones or undertones that come through in that film. There was a critic, Jay Hoberman, that I saw somebody quote in a conversation on Interview with the Vampire. Apparently, he said that the movie is a gay film with vampire subtext. It's quite remarkable, really, when I was watching that film, and you keep in mind that it came out, early-ish, mid-90s, and it has some sequences of just straightforward male eroticism that were it not for the fact that the characters had fangs and were drinking each other's blood, would have just totally blown people's minds that they were seeing what they were seeing. When you see Tom Cruise as Lestat, who is fantastic, by the way, wonderful. Everybody really has just a great performance in this film. Tom Cruise is not traditionally an actor that I follow. Like, he's fine. I've never thought much. But he's great in this film, and he's wonderful as Lestat. Like, he gets him. Brad Pitt gets Louis. Kirsten Dunst is perfect and heartbreaking as Claudia. Just wonderful, wonderful stuff all around. I can't say enough about these performances. But when you see Tom Cruise as Lestat levitating up into the air with Brad Pitt, and Lestat is sucking Louis' blood, and you see the look on Louis' face, like, wow, were people really okay with this? Like, and I don't say that like they shouldn't have been. I'm just, it's just incredible that, it's kind of the same thing that Rod Serling faced when he created the Twilight Zone. There were messages and themes that he wanted to touch on in straightforward drama that, TV censors would wag their fingers and cluck their tongues at, but he was able to communicate those things under the auspices of, oh, this is fantasy, this is science fiction. We're not talking about Earth, we're talking about some far-flung planet that just happens to really resemble what we're going through right now. It just seems to be a similar thing where it's like we can't show these kinds of moments in our cinema or in our art if we depict them as straightforward relationships between same-sex characters. But hey, no, it's not what you think it is. They're just turning each other into vampires. But it's great. It's great that they were able to do that, and it's just wow. When you see it, it's, like I said, it's quite remarkable, and it's moving in a way. Like, you know what? Even if we weren't necessarily able to do the real thing, how great is it that it came through in this form? Because it is quite beautiful to see that being depicted as openly as it possibly could. And in that sense, Anne Rice has talked about how the vampire is just this really great and powerful metaphor to work with because it speaks to the outsider in all of us. You can see, especially in that moment, how the vampire was the outsider figure that we needed to kind of communicate that particular information to us at that time. But just in general, you really feel for how those characters speak to all the different stripes of outsider in all of us and how we are able to identify with them. I think that's why this work has endured, this particular story, this series that Anne Rice wrote for pretty much the entire rest of her life with Lestat and company. It just speaks to people. When you got a winning formula like that, you really can't ask for much else, right? So those are my thoughts on Interview with the Vampire, both the film and the book. Like I said, I'm bummed that I didn't get to finish the book and really compare it to the film, but I am intent on finishing the book. I will do it because what I've read so far has been so fantastic. Great movie, highly recommend it. It is a bona fide horror classic in my eyes. So if any of you out there have not yet read the book or have not yet watched the film, can't recommend both of them enough. So that does it for our session of the Page to Screen Book Club today. It's been an absolute pleasure to sit and speak with you today, but this is a two-way street. If you've got thoughts and you want them to be heard, let yourself be heard down in the comments. Send us out an email. And again, any YouTube creators out there who want to connect and compose a little digital roundtable of book reviews, make up a little video yourself, send me the link, and I'll include you in the description so that we can build a little network of Interview with the Vampire Book Club meetings here from Haunted Cruise. So we will be shortly announcing our title for the March edition of Page to Screen Book Club. Going to be taking a little bit of a different approach, just so that we don't fall into the same traps as I did this time around. So I'll talk more about that in the upcoming announcement video. But of course, let us know what you think of this video and the channel in general. I love hearing from all of you, and I respond to every comment that I get. But in the meantime, keep reading, stay safe, and we will see you next time. Adios.